Hi, Liz. Thank you so much for submitting your poems this week. I'm going to dive right in. So, your first poem, Weekly Trip. I thought the details in this poem were really, really good. And you said, "Am I on the right track for describing things using imagery?" So, yes. I think and then you talk about figurative language and how it's linked to imagery. So, the way that I would consider this when writing a first draft of a poem is how you're engaging your senses. I think about imagery, as images representing other things, but so much of that is related to the sensory experience. And so sometimes I find it helpful when I'm writing a poem and I'm concerned with imagery, or my poem is concerned with imagery, is thinking about the sensory details of a thing. So if you were to look at this poem and look at this experience, the scent of baked goods, right? So what can you tell me about those baked goods? Do they smell like cinnamon? Does it smell like Christmas? What are the things that you can compare that whatever it is that you're smelling in the deli? What does it smell like? You mentioned the beeping. The soft beeping came from the front, and hushed voices surrounded me. So it's like, well, tell me more about what you hear there, right? So the soft beeping, what does it sound like? What is it reminiscent of? What can you compare that to? I hope this is making sense. If it's not, write me an email and I can totally clarify. But it's like if you start to think about the sensory detail around you, which you're already doing in this poem, but then compare it to other things. And I think you might find that it might be easier to like really choose the specific images that you want to in your poem if you're focusing on that sensory detail. So I hope that tip helps. It always helps me. This other one, Halloween, man, I have to tell you, this poem is done. It's amazing. There's nothing else you have to do with it. It's funny. It's like the fact that you chose to trace this particular poem, which is, I feel like 99% of the folks that grow up in a country where English is the first language, is the primary language or the national language, have heard this poem, have read this poem, have been exposed to this poem in school or at home or in a children's book. And so with that kind of exposure, to choose a poem with that kind of exposure and have the guts to trace that poem is awesome. And you did such a wonderful, wonderful job with it. It's funny. It's clever. Anyway, I just love it. I just love your second poem. It's fantastic and so much fun to read, right on the brink of Halloween. So thanks. All I have to say is thanks. A very rare moment where myself as a teacher and as someone who's workshopping a poem will simply say, thank you for writing it.